Hi there. In this video I'm going to be comparing and contrasting a typical cloning tool versus the Qimage Ultimate Vanish tool. So we'll see how those two work and the types of things you can do. I always find it a little funny how some of these companies that develop these new and highly publicized tools for filling different areas of your photos and things like that, they have these pruned images that are designed to work perfectly with their tool, and then when you go to use them you try to remove a pole or something distracting from your photo and you end up with a leg in the middle of it or something like that, and it doesn't really work like their videos show. So the purpose of this video is to show how the Vanish tool really works and what you can expect from it. So here we have a picture of some balloons that a friend of mine took. I think it was in New Mexico. And I'm just going to remove a couple of these balloons here with a typical cloning tool. I'm just using an old copy of Paint Shop Pro. I'm using that because it has low overhead and it works well for the video, but most of the cloning tools work in a similar fashion. I noticed that there's a gradient here on the sky and it goes from dark to light, from upper left to lower right. So I'm going to try to get some of that gradient in there by being creative on where my source point is. So I'm going to put my source point about right here and click, and then the destination I'll move down here along with the gradient so that hopefully I'll get some of that gradient replicated in my cloned area. And that looks pretty good. So I'll come over here and do the same sort of thing with this balloon, and we'll remove this one as well. So the cloning tool did a pretty good job on that. If you look really closely and move your eyes away from the spot a little bit, you might see a little bit of a smudge here that's a little darker, and that shows one of the downsides of using a cloning tool in a gradient like this. And I'll emphasize that on this top balloon by doing the same thing. I'll pick a source point, and then I'll go down here and try to take out this bigger balloon, and it'll exaggerate the effect a little bit more so you can see what I'm talking about. And the problem here is that a cloning tool, when you get to the far edge of what you're cloning, you'll find that it's not very good at figuring out what the gradient should be and what color you should end up on. So you end with an area like this, which you can clearly see the difference in color here because it didn't follow the gradient perfectly as I came down. Now you're going to have to use a smudge tool and come in here and clear up some of this stuff as a post-op type thing on the cloning tool. Now let's go over to Qimage Ultimate and we'll take a look at the same photo here. Bring this up in the editor by double clicking on it, and then I'll right click on this balloon so that comes up centered in the preview. And I'll also go to 2x because we were working at 200% in the other program. So we'll do the same thing here. For the Vanish, what I'm going to do is just click in the center of the balloon and drag out until it disappears. And as you can see, it perfectly replicates the gradient because it's basically looking at the information around it and pulling that inward. So you don't really have to worry about source point or anything like that. You can just make it disappear by dragging. And even on this larger balloon, let me right click on that over here, bring that to center. On this larger one, I think I'd probably take that in 2 hits. I click right about in the center of the balloon, get rid of the balloon first, and drag out until the balloon is gone, and I'll do the basket as a separate operation here, just because I think that looks a little better doing it that way. So I'll do that, get rid of the basket, click OK. And as you can see, it does a pretty good job just with one swipe getting rid of that. So that's one plus of using the Vanish tool because it'll actually take into account gradients, and you don't have to worry about this mess that you end up with when cloning. Okay, let's take an example of something that a clone tool can do that Vanish was not designed for. Remember that Vanish is for removing objects, And a clone tool can actually be used to do just that, clone. So if I wanted another copy of this lady walking on the beach here, I can click that as the source point and move over here and make another copy of her walking on the beach. So the clone tool can do that, and the vanish tool is primarily for removing subjects. So let's take a look at how the clone tool would handle this job here. On this one, I think I would probably, since the water looks pretty uniform here, I'd probably start out here a little bit, choose my source point, and then move in here and just start getting rid of the subject here. And I might actually move out a little bit further because you can start to see repeating patterns here with the clone tool, which you don't have a problem with the vanish tool. It doesn't repeat patterns. But that being said, as you can see, the clone tool is pretty easy to use to remove subjects like this. If you're careful, got a little bit of a misalignment there, so I can just start again there and continue. So the clone tool works really well for something like that. But does it mean that the vanish tool can't? No. You can still do something like this. Again, I'll go in 200% here, and we'll use the vanish tool to remove this person. And for this one, I'm going to use a mask, and I'm just going to paint the area that I want affected by my vanishes. So I'll create an area around this person, making sure to get everything, and I want to go a little bit beyond the edge because I don't want any of the person left in the photo, but I do want the vanish to not affect too much of the area in the water. So we'll put a few masks down here and make sure we get the whole subject. And when we're done, this mask will dictate what area the vanish will affect when you start your vanishing. So we'll just put down a few more masks here in this area. If you don't get everything with the first mask, just click. If you see spots in the middle that, like this right here, that were not affected, you just bring down another mask and tell it, yeah, I want that too. And again, down here on the bottom, I'll go a little bit into the sand because I'll show you in a second it doesn't really matter if you're going into the sand a bit here. So now that I've masked off the area that will be affected, I'm going to switch over to the vanish tool, and remembering that the vanish tool will draw everything toward the center. If you place your mouse cursor about in the center here where the sky would meet the water in that section, and just put your mouse right there and drag, it'll create the water line there, and you can keep going. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to go to different points and look at the patterns in the water. If you go too far, it'll start dragging sky from the top down. You don't want that. So if I go back a little bit and just move my mouse to get different radii for that vanish, you can make the water in the center there look like basically anything you want. So I'm going to stop about right there and say that looks good, and go down a little bit into this section of the mask here and do the same thing. Drag out, and again I'm just looking at the water in there to say what looks the most like what that water would look like in there. And I go to a good spot that looks like a good rendition of the water, and I stop. For these little dots that are left here, little places that were missed by the mask, just go back in here and do very small radius touch-ups like this to get rid of those. And already we've gotten rid of most of that person that was walking on the beach there. Down here I'm just going to take off these edges just to round off this area a little bit. Again, don't want to go too far. And for down here, and this part is something that really kind of looks like magic. You put your mouse cursor again on the line between the sand and the water, right about in the middle here, and click and hold and just drag, and the whole thing disappears. You've got sand where sand should be and water where water should be. Now again, go as far as you want to here, trying a different radius until you get what you think that water should look like in that area. And I'm going to get more texture in the water. I'm going to stop about right there. And if there's any other areas that you want to touch up that you think show a little evidence of what was done in that area, just go back and touch them up. So that's how we would use the Vanish to remove this person on the beach. I'll click OK and follow my mouse cursor over here, and we'll see that we've removed that person using the Vanish tool. Now there's one last thing I wanted to show you here, and that's how well the Vanish tool works on facial blemishes. Now I'm going to save people from the humiliation of being a poster child for acne or something like that, and I'll show you how to do it on this statue here, but you'll get the idea. When removing small spots like this, the Vanish tool is ideal because you can basically just place your mouse cursor in the center and just wipe away. There's no deciding what should my source spot be and how big do I need to go on the clone. You just click and wipe these spots away. And even for smaller spots, once you've clicked and removed one, if you have spots that are a similar size, you can just, once you've established that radius, you can just single click and the spots just disappear. And because it's drawing information from around the spots that you're getting rid of, there's no worry with where to clone from, where to clone to, and all that. You can just wipe these spots out very quickly and easily with just one touch of the mouse, as you can see. And even in areas like this that are a gradient that goes from dark to light, it'll work in all these situations. You just click in the middle of this little stripe here and drag, and it'll get rid of that without any problem. So much easier to use than a cloning tool when you're trying to get rid of small blemishes like this, especially if you have a lot of them to get rid of, because you can just click and just wipe them away with one click and drag like that. It's very easy to do, and there's no cleanup afterwards where you have to clean up the edges that a clone tool made or things like that. So thanks for watching this video, and we hope you enjoy the new Vanish tool.